Thank you for joining Sertl Optics 360 Pulse. I am your host, Jennifer Sertl. I'm the Director of Marketing at Sertl Optics. 360-degree imaging is part of everyday life, and Sertl Optics technology is being designed to accelerate the delivery of life-saving resources, ensure aerospace safety, ensure surveillance, enhance surveillance capabilities for protection, and also increase immersive experiences. This podcast, 360 Pulse, is dedicated to featuring immersive technology and innovators working on these capabilities. Today's guest is Dan Sola. Dan is the CEO of Archangel Imaging, which deploys smart machines alongside people to protect valuable remote assets and at-risk staff by integrating best-in-class AI, satellite analytics, robotics, drones, and IoT into human workflows. His leadership actually helped set a bunch of world records for solar electric flight. He also had a military career previously with service in Afghanistan and has mentored several UAV startups. Most recently, he was part of the Genius program in Syracuse, New York, and actually Archangel Imaging won $1 million. And hopefully you've heard the program we had with it, Genius New York program with Kara Jones. The director of that program was a previous guest. But I'm so excited to have Dan here today. Thanks for finding time for us.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me, Jen.
So you were a technologist and then became an entrepreneur. Can you share with us some of the learnings or highlights from that transition?
Yeah, I guess I was really always motivated by the output of what I was working on, the impact. I think I was luckily aware when I was going through university and shortly afterwards that, a lot of the world doesn't get to choose what they do. And I was in a position where I could sort of choose where to focus my efforts. And so I really picked areas of work where I thought, they might not succeed, and I could sort of help where I could. Frankly, I would have swept the floor, but I would have worked on anything technology-wise. And I think for me, it was a little bit of a surprise to sort of realize at some point that I was sort of running things. But it turns out that was just the highest leverage activity that I could have been doing at the time to sort of work towards the common goals. And a friend of mine ended up sort of laughing quite hard at me when I described myself as an engineer, and the idea that my key contribution was technical, he thought was hilarious. I guess that was the point I realized that probably I should be running the company and the commercial aspects rather than fiddling with code.
There's a lot of humility in the idea of leading where you are. And I almost say, it sounds like you're an accidental leader, but in a way you just did what was required and continually learned. And through that learning, you ended up creating some incredible technology, as well as setting world records. I don't always get the opportunity to talk to world record setters. So tell us a little bit more about solar electric flight.
Well, that's a little bit of time ago now, although the program is still continuing, and that program is owned by Airbus. They continue to set world records, although, they're always breaking their own records at the moment. It was a very exciting time when we were sort of building that technology when it really didn't exist. Very small team, and the humility you were just talking about, I think, I see leadership skills being emphasized a hell of a lot in university programs. It's all very important. It's very hard to have leaders if you don't have followers. And that team, what really sort of, I think, allowed that team to achieve those records and the pioneering work that they did at such pace was because actually it was pretty humble, very flat hierarchy, and everyone just trusted that all of their colleagues were the best in the world at what they were doing, which luckily for us was true at the time. I realize I'm talking more about the team than the technology. The technology that we were working on at the time was to try and get aircraft that essentially flew indefinitely. So the idea is you'd put it up, it would fly in the stratosphere, it would recharge every day from sunlight, and you could do things with that aircraft that you would otherwise need to use a satellite for, except because it's much, much closer to planet Earth, you get better performance from radios and cameras and things like that just get better with closer range. And crucially, you can bring it down again and upgrade or change the payload and move it around. So it had a lot of advantages over satellite as well. That has taken quite a long time to get from, let's say, pioneering breakthroughs and record set to, actually it's real technology that people can go and buy. Yeah, really exciting to have watched that technology since about 2015, when I stopped being sort of directly involved, to see that technology continue to succeed, set new highs. And Airbus have really backed that in a big way. So more credit to them.
So it sounds like it took probably 8 years from conception to full on deployment. Is that right? I'm just trying to level set. I teach a class at RIT, Exploring Innovation, and I love people to hear how long it actually takes to put it together. I think that point that you make is so important for the long view. I know a lot of the hardware people listening to our program are in it for the long view. And so it's really neat to kind of hear that you had to stick with it for so long.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of a labor of love initially. It's just something people thought should exist. The original team that set that up, there was only 4 people in that, which didn't include me. So it really depends where you sort of start the clock on the start point, I think, how long it took. I will say that it's one of the differences I noticed between the UK and the US. The UK has a really excellent history of invention and then kind of not doing things with it. So there's an element of things do take a little bit longer. I think in the ecosystem we have in the UK, it's a lot more sort of a lot of scientists, far fewer sort of entrepreneurs thinking of how to scale things successfully. So I'm sure that's an element, but probably a couple of decades is easy to claim for the time it's taken. Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't know how well that these questions would go together, but hearing about your leadership style is really, it wasn't that you were a boss, you were a teammate doing what needed to happen. And then even in this world record setting, you talk really more about the team than the technology. And I've heard you describe your current technology at Archangel Imaging as being a teammate versus a tool. And I have not heard that statement before. And I'd love you to tell us more about what that means.
I'll try and unpack that a little. Yeah, the users that we try and support, that we focus our efforts on supporting, are usually deployed into remote places or challenging environments. We focus on defense, policing, first responders. If you look at the infrastructure in Ukraine at the moment, that is not what it looked like a year ago. And if you look at the tools available, the technologies available for remote monitoring right now, they're dependent on 2 things. They're dependent on infrastructure, especially communications, but generally they're dependent on various forms of infrastructure, and they're dependent on attention. So CCTV, you don't task CCTV, it streams video over the internet and someone sits and watches screens, in the classic sense. You don't task a drone, you task a person who uses a drone, and they use that drone as a long-range tool. What we're really trying to do is deploy the AI systems forward so they sit on the camera or they sit on the drone, and that allows you to just give a task to the drone, like patrol this area and look for smugglers landing on the coastline, or illegal fishing, or refugees at risk, or counting animals in the savannah, or identifying tanks, or whatever the task is. In the same way you would task a manned pilot, you would give a relatively high level task, and then you need to be able to trust that even if communications breaks and you can't give the drone all of your attention, that it is basically going to do what you've asked it to do and act like a teammate instead of just a long-range tool that you have to constantly manage, and that will sort of fail as soon as the communications breaks. So I guess that's really the distinction we try and get to. We want to be able to give a high-ish, fairly high-level task to a piece of technology and trust that it's going to do its job. What we don't want to do is have to allocate personnel to sit there and watch screens and have a piece of tech that's very vulnerable because it's dependent on GPS or communications.
Well, it almost sounds like what you're working on has us have a relationship with the technology as a coworker. And I'm wondering, Sherry Turkle at MIT has done a lot of research on our relationships with technology, and sometimes says that people tend to trust technology more than other people. So it's going to be very, very interesting. I know we at Sertl Optics are very grateful and excited about having a partnership with you. And recently, our CEO, Zach Niazi, had said Archangel Imaging is already deploying novel software solutions that are enhancing autonomous surveillance, critical infrastructure, and enabling navigation in GPS-denied environments. Very exciting. Can you share a little bit about what you are hoping to do with us and why our collaboration makes so much sense?
Yeah, we have, I guess, two main product lines that we work on. We have some AI ground cameras, which are called Argonaut. After several abortive naming attempts, when we found, every god of vigilance essentially has already been used to name a camera. So the Argonaut systems can sit in the middle of nowhere. I'll use anti-poaching as an example because people also like animals more than people, it turns out, a lot of the time. And that camera can basically sit there and very dully just watch for a guy with a gun. That's definitely not an elephant. Not actually a particularly hard AI task in that case. But importantly, it does that in a relatively low power way, and it's fully self-contained, and it sits there off grid, and it has no sense of imagination or boredom or bribery and corruption or bladder pressure. So it just sits there, pays attention, and raises its hand if it sees something interesting. Those kind of systems for borders and for particularly sensitive sites, doing some work in the UK on some particularly sensitive sites, they would really benefit from a much wider field of view. And the solution today is to put a sort of high magnification lens on a gimbal, and you sort of steer that around. But what, of course, that means is that you're staring through a drinking straw. And you might have great resolution of that bush or that particular, truck that's parked, but you're missing all sorts of other context, and you can only look at one thing at a time. What Sertl Optics technology offers is the potential to have high resolution, but essentially wide field of view staring arrays, and so that you can allow those autonomous systems to continue to monitor big areas without either really reducing the range if you have a wide angle, or using these very expensive gimbal systems that have all the weaknesses I just described. On the airborne side, we are working a lot on navigation. We are doing some work in maritime patrol. We're doing a lot of work with navigation. And fundamentally, we need to be making decisions on board. We need to be equipping the machines to make not many decisions. They're not that smart, but to be making decisions on board about where to go next and what to do. And those decisions are based on observed context. So the quality of your decisions directly correlates to the quality of the imagery that we get in. And so putting best-in-class imaging systems next to that decision-making capability, it's kind of a win-win. That allows us to make the highest quality decisions in the most timely manner that we can. And in particular, Sertl are obviously involved with NASA on some detect and avoid systems, which we are very, very interested in pairing up with detect and avoid and make a decision about where the best place to go next is.
That's wonderful. We're starting to use the language inside beyond detect and avoid to detect and navigate, and really working on application for situational consciousness, which is really exciting to work with you on. And I think for people that are not technologists that are hearing about drones in general, I don't think they really understand the world problem solving that's being done with this technology, which is one of the reasons why I'm really inspired by your applications, because they really do solve significant structural problems as well. Not only, tactical problems, but structural, which is really, really important. So we're talking about what's possible today. What is your vision for the future of the integration between AI, software, and hardware?
Yeah, there's a few questions in the question there, but I'll try and be more succinct. I would say AI is obviously getting a lot of press at the moment, and that's been building for several years, and still feels relatively recent that the latest version of ChatGPT has been released, and it's very impressive. But at least part of me sort of can't quite cheer, because a lot of the work that's going to be done by those AI systems is essentially work that's already being done, but it's being automated, so you don't need a person. There are all sorts of positives I can see from that, but it's not what we're focused on, and I think it's not the answer to your question. What we've been focused on, and Sertl as well, is tasks that aren't currently solved. So I'm not particularly interested in automating away service personnel and police officers. If you can get people out of harm's way, that's great. But genuinely, we're focused on problems that are not solved today. We've tried solving them with people, usually very hardworking, very sweaty people, who are really doing their best with the tools they've got out in the field. The problems remain unsolved. We've tried solving them with tools. The problems remain unsolved. We're only going to solve big problems like huge area coastal protection, anti-poaching. We're deployed for counter-suicide on the railways in the UK. A lot of the sort of challenges that are faced by our most exposed workers today, we can help solve those problems, and that's where we're focused our efforts. And I think that's what I kind of see as the sort of big utility vision: AI and software and hardware integration as a sort of package. Actually solving challenges that otherwise wouldn't be solved, not just automating jobs away.
That's wonderful. So you've been listening to Dan Sola from Archangel Imaging. What I will say is solving tomorrow's problems. So
that is a bit more succinct.
No, it's so wonderful. I'm so thankful for all of you listening to our program today. I hope that you will continue to subscribe and find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. We are very interested how immersive technology positively impacts safety and human connection. And if you know a story or an innovator that we should have on the program, please let me know at jennifer@circleoptics.com. I also would like to thank so many people. We have the Institute of Optics, we have Genius New York, Luminate Accelerator, AFWorks, Cider Technologies, and Archangel Imaging, our new partner, and AUVSI. Thank you for joining us.